Welcome to Money Talks. I've talked a great deal about renting a property from the landlord's perspective. Today's show is going to be about the tenant's perspective. As a tenant, the most important thing for you to know is that your landlord will take care of any repairs or issues with the property promptly. Before you sign your lease, make sure that it details what things the landlord is responsible for. We know that your landlord is responsible for structural damage, and because it is his property, he'll probably do that rather quickly. But you also have to put into your lease that he's responsible for the heating, the air conditioning, the gas, the refrigerator, the oven, the plumbing, the carpets or flooring, whichever you have. And if your property comes with a washer, a dryer, a dishwasher or anything else that could get broken and would need to be repaired or replaced, and that part should be in the lease as well, that your landlord should be responsible for repairing or replacing any of these things, that has to be in the lease agreement as well. It should also be stipulated as to how long the landlord has to make those repairs. Make sure you have everything in writing. Just recently there was a news item about a slumlord in the US who owned about 350 pieces of property that were in deplorable condition. They were dangerous to live in, and the landlord kept saying he'd make the repairs and he never got around to it. And finally, the city took him to court. The judge, in all his wisdom, found him guilty and sentenced him to live for a few months in one of those dilapidated units, while his mansion that he actually owns went empty. So for the next few months, he's under house arrest with electronic surveillance that doesn't allow him to leave his apartment. That doesn't happen too often. So to protect yourself, you need to have in writing what the waiting period is between the time you report a breakdown to the time that he comes to fix it. Firstly, try to find a property that looks as though it's in good condition. If possible, one that's newer and already has a good heating or cooling system, a nice kitchen and bathroom. This isn't always a guarantee that new appliances won't break down, but at least it gives you a fighting chance that you won't have to keep calling your landlord or property agent every third day to fix something else. In today's downturn economy, with more properties than ever on the market to let, it's not so easy to find good tenants. Therefore, you may be able to get a reduction in the rent, to negotiate the agent's fees, and to ask for more things, for example, lawn service. Many landlords will paint the place before trying to rent it out. But for those who don't, you might negotiate where you buy the paint and he supplies the labour. All too often, the landlord would prefer to buy the paint and for you to spend your money on labour, because labour costs a lot more than paint. So if you're negotiating, try to negotiate that he'll supply the labour and you'll supply the paint. But let's start the negotiations sooner than the landlord. Let's start negotiations with the estate agent or the management firm. Try to negotiate that these fees are collected from the landlord, not you. If it's too hard a sell, try to negotiate a 50-50 split. After all, in this downturn economy, landlords don't want to have a property that sits empty. If the management company's charging 2 weeks rent in advance, maybe you can get the landlord to pay 1 week and you'll pay 1 week. In some countries, tenants have to pay inspection fees every 3 to 6 months. That really should be the landlord's responsibility. This is his property. Anything that the landlord has as part of his property, those expenses should be his. If you want to put up drapes in your windows, that's your responsibility. If the floor starts to sag, that's your landlord's responsibility. But if you plan on living in that property for a long period of time, I'd suggest that you treat the property as if you owned it. Don't make unreasonable demands on your landlord so that when you do have real problems that need to be addressed, he may be more apt to respond quickly and get those repairs done immediately. Changing the locks after a tenant leaves and before the new tenant arrives might be one of those negotiable things. It's not necessarily the responsibility of the landlord. He'd be within his rights to say, the locks work perfectly fine, just like the appliances work perfectly fine. If you have trouble with security, that's your problem, not mine. So that is one of the things you might want to negotiate with either the management company or the landlord directly. A colleague of mine had a dreadful experience recently when she just moved into her new property. She was coming out of the shower and a strange man just appeared in the hallway. It turned out he was the previous tenant who still had the keys to her house, and he wanted to collect her plant. In her case, she was lucky that she was able to negotiate with the management company for the landlord to replace the locks, whereas someone in the US was asleep at the time that her new landlord used his key to get into the house. There was no negotiation there. She had to pay to have the locks changed. So to summarise, make sure the landlord's responsibilities for repairs and replacements are clearly written into your tenancy agreement. Try to negotiate everything from the agent's fees, inspection fees, locks to be changed, and any extras you can think of. Don't go away, we'll be right back.